en español.
Hola, sí, ya está.
Eh,
Hola, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Welcome, dear African and Spanish women. Welcome you all. I'm glad to have you here today, and also those of you following us on streaming. I give the floor to the director of the Mujeres por África Foundation, Teresa.
Tardes, welcome again. I just want to say that we are very happy to have you here for a thoughtful thinking together session. Pilar is going to explain a little more what we're going to do today. I just want to thank the AECID, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Casa Árabe for hosting this very promising session that the Foundation Women for Africa has organized within the Raisa program. I also want to thank our team at the Foundation Women for Africa because they have been really working very hard, and some of them are here today, especially Ana Salado, who has worked very, very hard to put this together. So all of us really think this effort is worth it, very worth it, and it's a very, very special occasion to have the luxury, have you all leaders, African women leaders from all over the continent, and Spanish leaders also from different professional fields, very talented women. So thank you very much, and let's start.
Okay, thank you very much, Teresa. Now in English, welcome to all our African friends and also to the Spanish one. Welcome to everybody, the ones who are here in presence and also the ones who are following this act by internet. I will change to Spanish so that it is easier also for the people who are following us by internet. Ayer las lideresas...
Yesterday, African leaders in the program Raisa by AECID and a group of Spanish women, myself among them, we started this activity, Diferentes pero Iguales, Different but the Same, which is an initiative by our foundation. We started this activity with a sincere and open dialogue among us. It felt short, actually, when we finished, because we could have spent hours and hours talking like women, women who are concerned about what's going on in our countries, and we are committed to change for a better future for women around the globe. It's true that we have different situations, different contexts, because we live in different countries, with different cultures, with different societies. Also, our status as women is different, and we talked about all that, and we realized that there are more things that make us the same than the ones that divide us. Because, well, yes, we are different, but we are the same nonetheless. This is the reason why we divided the women in the program in different groups depending on their profession, their activity, and each group got together with a Spanish woman in the same field. These groups assess the situation of women in the different areas. Those areas where activists, communicators, representatives in the legal area, the academia, public administrations, also women, peace and safety, and entrepreneurs. In the different speeches we'll listen to now, we will hear all these. We will see what I was saying, that we have more things in common than things that divide us. We will have representatives from each of those 7 groups that we organized with African and Spanish leaders, and they will present the conclusions that they reached. We are going to start with the activists group. Activists fighting for rights, for freedom, for integrity, and for dignity for women. It will be Hafasa Fabiola Costello and Maria Murnau from Spain, who will be presenting the results from this dialogue, where we also had Amina from Algeria and our colleague from Tunisia. I give you the floor.
Bueno, encantada de...
It's a pleasure to see you again. Can I take off my mask, please? Well, I first want to thank the Foundation for relying on me and my colleague Paloma for having us here and to have the great pleasure to talk to these so important activists. And I also want to thank them for their work, for their effort, which is, well, of course, being an activist in any place in Africa is a bigger risk than being an activist in Spain, so it's not the same level at all. And I wanted to say that. The dialogue we had yesterday was great. And, well, as important conclusions go, we had 3 different blocks or pillars. First, it was the obstacles for that gender equality that we're looking for, that society that still believes that women and men have different roles in society. And, on the other hand, the other big obstacle is the lack of political commitment. Especially in our country, in Spain, feminism becomes political propaganda before elections, and it just stays there, it doesn't get farther. Then secondly, another of the important aspects is the solutions that the government can offer. The most important ones are empowering girls through education, not only to guarantee that they will find equality, but also that all those invisible barriers that we are developing in ourselves are avoided. Then we need to develop educational future for women, for girls, no matter where they've been born. And we also need feminist initiatives to be carried out, because it's difficult to do this sometimes because we need funds. What can I tell you that you don't already know? Also about what governments can do. Us, as feminists, we have the power to raise awareness among the population, especially in younger generations. And this was a very good opportunity, because it's true that through social media we can share dialogues with people in Latin America, for example, since we don't have the language barrier. But it's true that it's more difficult to talk to activists in other languages, right? Because it's a very difficult topics. Activism, politics, it's different to talk about that with people who speak a different language. And I don't want to take much more of your time because, my colleague has more interesting things to share with you.
Thanks for just more to share from our group. I'll be speaking in English, so let me give a few seconds for people who need the translation to put it on. My name is Hafsat Abiola. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm president of Women in Africa, but I'm actually just today, at this moment, representing our Group 1 to report back to you all. I'd like to, in addition to what my dear sister Maria has said, just share with you some of the very beautiful things, or even maybe not beautiful in the sense that they were inspirational, but just really powerful images that came out of our conversation, which was an incredible conversation. But I want to begin with Yusra. We had women in our group, along with our sister Paloma and Maria from Spain. We had a woman from Tunisia, Algeria, Ethiopia, and myself from Nigeria. And just to share that, beginning with Yusra from Tunisia, she said something really incredibly powerful, at least I felt. She said, you know, she's an advocate, a militant. You will remember the Arab Spring. She was involved. She was younger then, and she was bold and crazy, and she really was idealistic and believed, and she would go to different events, marches, everything. And then after some time, she was also involved as a young lawyer going to courts. And she said something. She said she realized that the laws, the institutions, all of that was all structured to cage women. Imagine, this is even after Tunisia had passed such a powerful, groundbreaking law for women's equality, but it was not enforced. So she realized that all of the system was to cage women. And I think that's extremely powerful, because I think that what we need to understand is that patriarchy is kind of like a force. And to change it, you need a counterforce. And Yusra shared with us, Amina from Algeria, you know, those people you saw when their leader, who had been in power for over 30 years, when they wanted him out, you saw them, the people of Algeria on the street. You saw them, everybody did, and you saw the women. When Yusra, also in Tunisia, in the midst of their effort to change their country, Yusra was on radio. She was talking and saying, what did Yusra say? She said, it's not possible to talk about rights for one group and not for another. Essentially, it doesn't make sense to talk about rights for men and forget women. We're all together. Yusra got 10,000 hate mail about killing her. You know, and then our sister from Ethiopia was sharing, I'm sure you were all present when President Abiy became president of Ethiopia, and his inspirational act of having a cabinet that was 50-50, shortly after Canada's cabinet that was 50-50. And I, as an African, was so proud, because Canada, the President Trudeau had said, Prime Minister Trudeau had said, because it's 2017, I think it was 2017. And I was just like, we Africans are also moving with the time. But in the subsequent election, from 50-50, the women in their government dropped to 36 or so %. So there was this question about force. How do we maintain the momentum? How do we change a system? And yesterday, when we met with the Minister for Justice of your country in the evening, she said something interesting. She said, we need political, social, and institutional commitment. And I want to, in closing, share with you my sister, Maria's effort. This young lady, from 6 years ago, she has been building something on social media from 6 years ago. This is the English version. It only has 12,000 followers on Instagram. It's called Women's Liber. In Spanish, there's Feminista Ilustrada. And in Instagram, it has over 600,000 followers. On Facebook, she has over 500,000 followers. What is she teaching people? Please applaud. Please applaud her. What is she teaching people? Let me tell you, I'm sorry. Let me just quickly share with you what she's teaching people. A couple, you see this couple, I don't know if you can see. We want a boy. Then another woman is standing there. She says, whatever a boy can do, whatever can you do with a boy that you cannot do with a girl? This is just one. They have many. Look at her. She just keeps going. And this is the English one. The Spanish one even has more. And she has been doing this over 6 years, building a movement to counter the force of repression and evil dominating and containing women. We can also do that in Africa. We just have to keep going and keep building and because, you know, it takes, you plant a seed, as I said last night with our king, you plant a seed and it will grow, and we just have to have confidence and faith. And I know that my sisters, Yusra, Amina, Sain, show this, and we all do. But all of us, I'd want all of you in this room, all the women here, whether you're entrepreneurs, journalists, whatever, I want you to be activists. Because activism for women is a full-time job, and we're not going to make the world better. Some of us are like, I'm going to be into business. No, whatever you're in, also be an activist, be gangster. Thank you.
Sorry, I will repeat it. En nuestras conversaciones pudimos no solo sino compartir ideas y experiencias.
We could share experiences, and we realized that the challenges we're facing are similar. Like, we will keep on listening and hearing the rest of the session, and as we already heard Maria and Jafasa tell us, in the legal arena, we're going to have the Spanish Inmaculada Montalban later and Anne Leri. In this group, we also had people from South Africa. I give you the floor, Inmaculada and Anne.
The floor is yours.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pilar, for your introduction. Congratulations to the foundation. This event and this initiative of bringing us together, women from different fields, with the goal to share our experiences, positive experiences that help our societies in all the different areas, so we can achieve and we can get women in powerful positions. Because at the end of the day, if we empower women, if women have positions where they have power, this will be a benefit, a huge benefit for the whole society. This is a challenge. We need to understand that women need to have a level that shows the level of democracy. If we are in a situation where we can have power, we can make policies, we will be able to contribute to improve democracy as a whole. In yesterday's dialogue with my dear friends, and now we will have our friend Anne tell you also about the main factors, aspects we discussed. The idea is that the gender inequality is something we find in all societies. It is deeply rooted in history and in culture. So we need laws, specific laws, focused on gender equality. We need laws, specific laws against gender violence, which is the maximum expression of inequality. And us, as members of the judicial power, we apply those laws, we enforce those laws, but we need efficient laws. It's not enough to have those laws. We need to assess how they are being enforced, and we need to correct any problems, any mistakes when it comes to making rights for women a reality. That's why one of our conclusions was that we need the commitment to work in organizing networks with institutions like, well, today maybe an observatory, assessing how laws are being enforced when it comes to gender equality and gender violence. And so we can correct any mistakes or any deficiency. We insist in the importance of training, of education for judges when it comes to enforcing these laws, so we can avoid that their decisions might be biased on stereotypes and that may be negative for women. It was an honor for me to share the dialogue yesterday with my colleagues, and I give the floor to Anne, who will tell you the rest about what we discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will speak in English. This was a group comprising of mainly judges and practicing women lawyers. And one of the things I know in the legal profession, I'd call my sister my senior, has mentioned, is that we do have commonalities. Yes, we have different legal regimes, but from what we discussed, it was very enriching to see we are different but equal. The challenges we have are almost similar. We have what we'd call a plethora of laws. We have sufficient laws and policies. None of our countries really can say we don't have what it takes. What then is a challenge? I think the challenge lies mostly in terms of the implementation. And as women who occupy the legal space, I think one of the answers we were seeking to find is how do we bring laws to life? One of the things we say in the legal world is that laws are rarely self-implementing. You have to have the human aspect to bring it to life so that those who are meant to benefit from the laws and policies actually do that. And so in our situational analysis, we found three main things that we'd like to share. One, as I've mentioned, is that the laws are there, the policies are in place. However, what is lacking is the implementation or full realization of these laws, partially because of many reasons. We have cultural and religious stereotypes. Remember, at the end of the day, those who are supposed to implement the laws are human beings, and so they have certain stereotypes that influence them, and thereby making them perceive laws in a particular way or not. We also have the issue of lack of economic resources. Some of the laws we require, especially for protection for women, require resourcing. And one of the challenges we find in a lot of our countries is that when budgetary allocations are being made for mega infrastructural projects, that money is never lacking. But when we need money, for example, to put up shelters, you have to do much, much more lobbying. So what do we need to do in terms of lawmaking to make sure the money follows the resources? The resources follow what is required. Secondly, very important, and I'll rush through it, is that we need specialized gender and human rights approach, especially when dealing with issues of gender-based violence. When you're listening or adjudicating to cases as judges or magistrates or prosecuting these cases, you need to be informed by what has led to the current situation, so that when you're having laws, they're not just laws on paper, but when we push for application of the laws, you're able to understand why, for example, do we have challenges of female genital mutilation. It's a long challenge that has been in our countries. What has led us to where we are? Issues of patriarchy are things that need to be understood. But also, which is a silver lining, is that we celebrate that women are also occupying huge legal positions in our different countries. As I'll give the example of Kenya, we are now celebrating a first female Chief Justice and a Deputy Chief Justice who are women. So this is, we have a chance to have feminist litigation, feminist decisions from feminist-occupied benches. That is such a plus. So if we have all this going for us, what do we need to do? One is that we have to be very serious and deliberate on feminist implementation of the laws that we have. We have to invest heavily in training, and not just training, the cliche of it, is to have sufficient capacity, whether it's men or women, who understand as judicial officers why we have particular laws and what they are meant to serve, so as to protect women in our different jurisdictions. But importantly, we must also go to the grassroots level. That is something that has come out in a lot of discussions, that we must have empowerment at the grassroots level, empower women, and especially girls. Remember, the attitudes are formed when they're very young, so that they grow up knowing that the world has space for them, violations are wrong, and when they are violated, they should be able to reach out and to speak out. And most importantly, invest in financial systems and supports and social networks that are able to protect women, so that it's not just a duty of the judicial officers to implement laws, but even within our social networks, we have examples of networks that are present, for example, paralegal trainings that can be able to enforce the rule of law. So what are we celebrating in conclusion? One, there are certain experiences we saw that are very good. For example, in Mali and Mozambique, we have one-stop centers. And one-stop centers are something that within the judicial circles have really been heralded. It is because it makes life much easier for a victim who just has to show up once, see a police officer, see a medical doctor, see a psychologist or psychosocial support, and in addition to that, have legal aid. That is very important. That reduces the re-victimization and makes life much easier for judges who then need to adjudicate the cases. So we have that example. We had another example from Kenya. where we have collaboration between the law enforcement and the judiciary and the communities to be able to prosecute cases of sexual violence, which makes the stigma less, and you're able to hasten the practice of prosecution. And in Spain, our host country, we had a very interesting case study of observing gender-based violence, where we have studies that are deliberate on implementation of gender and laws within the country. So as a legal fraternity, we are very excited. We have formed a sisterhood, and we really look forward to seeing how best, as we retreat, we can support each other, and really to thank AECID and the entire organizers of the program for bringing us together. Thank you for listening to me.
Si hay algo que nos une a todas, es la lucha por
If there's anything that we share, it's our fight to close the gap of inequality that separates men and women, and that women can be citizens across the world, full citizens. One of the factors to achieve equality, is education. That's why it's going to be very interesting to hear the conclusions that our women in the academia have reached. There we have women from science, from arts, 3 doctors, the Jordanian biologist. Yes, she's Jordanian, not African, but from the Mediterranean, Nuna Tatamuni. We have the Mauritanian Huda Babasid Mamed and Loretal from Senegal. They're exposing their conclusions. Teresa Langle from Spain, Director of Women for Africa, and Raja El Hamsi from Morocco.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Well, like our colleagues, we really appreciate this opportunity of sharing all of this together from Spain, from the Mediterranean, from Africa, to share this fruitful space of dialogue. Our group, as our colleague has said, is academia and research. It's made up by different people from Africa. Huda from Mauritania, she's director of the Center of Investigation of Teledetection and Cartography. From Senegal, Dara, who manages a think tank of agriculture. From Morocco, I'm a teacher of the University Mohammed V in Rabat, Department of Human Science and Social Sciences. And from Jordan, Lubna, researcher and scientist specialist in breast cancer and Alzheimer. From Spain, we were really pleased to have the director of Women for Africa, the foundation, Women for Africa, Teresa Langle de Paz, and Anna Fumarola, coordinator of the program called They Investigate, the research for Women for Africa. So our goal was sharing experiences to foster the participation of women in science and in academia, so that the access by women to this area reaches high levels, so that they can reach other spheres. What are the threats and the challenges that we've highlighted in our panel? Well, basically, women and men, and this is common for every country, women and men in Africa and the Mediterranean don't have the same opportunities. We can speak about the glass ceiling that hinders the evolution of women to reach higher places in society. They can be university professors, but they have a hard time becoming chancellors in universities. In some African countries, they cannot even become professors. So it's not just from an organizational perspective, also in research, they get trapped in the lowest ranges of the academia and teaching world. And this is something that we need to overcome. Another element that we've highlighted, programs and grants at national and international levels for research addressed at women in Africa and the Mediterranean. They have to bear in mind the different overload women face because they have to work, but also they have to take care of the children, their parents, and the family in general. So women and men don't use time in the same way. We may get a lot of equality, but women still have this burden on them. So we need a gender approach when considering the role of women in research. I'm going to present just a few other ideas, and my colleague will elaborate on that. There's another threat or limit to the development of women in research, which is red tape. We've seen it while talking to each other. Some of our colleagues, it was really complicated for them to be able to come here to get the signature of their manager to authorize this trip to Spain, although this was something beneficial for the university. Also, difficulties of implementation. One of our colleagues said that there's money, there are financial resources for research in some countries, but it's complicated due to red tape. To get the signature, to buy materials for a lab, sometimes tests get wasted. So it's difficult to implement research programs due to red tape and sometimes due to a lack of human resources. So one of the challenges that's considered, besides overcoming all of these, we have to reduce the gap between research and employment, research and the business world, so that researchers are not trapped in labs or universities, and then the employment, the business world is in a different place. So as part of this development, we need to reach higher degrees, and Spain is an example in this sense. So this way, researchers will be able to take their knowledge to the economic world, to the business world, and this will benefit the countries. This is also good for development. We need to reduce women's overload so that they can work more on research, so that they don't have these family-related limits. We need to support sciences, but not just exact science, also human and social sciences. And in this case, this program called Women and Science. Another proposal was aligning academia and activism. Most of the participants here, many of them are from the academia, they're also activists. So if you combine these two areas, we can improve the situation of women. And in this sense, mentorships are important, continuous mentorship, so that it doesn't stop after a few years. There should be a continuous mentorship inherited from one generation to the other. These are the general lines that we have highlighted in our panel. And now my colleague is going to further elaborate on this. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to elaborate on Raisa's ideas. Regarding the first point she raised, which is how difficult it is for women in the academia to develop their professional careers due to numerous factors, but also to be promoted within the academic world due to this ceiling we're always mentioning. But also regarding the impossibility, it was not difficult, it was completely forbidden for women to access positions of power within the power structures in the academia. Chancellors, presidents, that's impossible in many countries. And at least the countries that were represented at the table, it was impossible in those countries. So we discussed something which I think it's interesting to share. Universities are somehow a small universe, a reflection of what happens in the political power in countries. Some of our colleagues said that the candidates to be chosen as a chancellor of a university, they have to be directly appointed or nominated by the national government. In other words, our conclusion is that this impossibility of being promoted within the power structures in the academic world, it's a reflection of the difficulties men have in a patriarchy to give power to women, because at the end of the day, this is a power structure. This was one of our conclusions. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that this is something that we discussed a lot. When women in these processes of promotion within the university, women find obstacles, mainly from male colleagues, not female colleagues. And this is against the stereotype that women hinder each other's positions, and that's not true. When bosses are women, academic women develop their careers easier than in this environment. Then also regarding the work-life balance in our daily lives, combining an academic career and the roles of women within society. An example was raised. It can well illustrate how necessary it is to include policies with a gender approach to fight against these difficulties, which may seem silly, but they make it very impossible, very difficult for women to develop their professional careers, to be enthusiastic about their profession. For example, pregnant women have a hard time. Well, first of all, there's a stigma. They try to hide their pregnancies. Why is there a stigma? Well, because it is understood in very machistic environments that it will be more difficult for them to fulfill their academic roles. For example, taking care of an exam in a place where there are a lot of stairs. One of our colleagues said that she lost a baby because she forced herself to take care of an exam in a classroom in which he had to go up and down the stairs all the time, and that effort caused a miscarriage. This is an example, one of many. Things that are invisible, but they're obstacles in our daily lives that make it really complicated to develop your career. Also, within sciences, women are a minority. In pure science, there's a minority of women. And within pure science, there are some areas which are more feminine, so to speak. Anything that has to do with care, such as nutrition, farming, agriculture, ecology, environment, etc. That's interesting too. And then it was said that after the Arab Spring, there's been a genuine regression in those countries where there was a revolution during the Arab Spring. There was a regression in women's rights. We're seeing this in different countries in the Arab world. This is a cause for concern. This is something we should put on the table. And regarding proposals, some of these have been already been mentioned by Raisa. There was a general one, a very interesting one. I liked it very much. We shouldn't self-censor ourselves or self-limit ourselves. We were really blunt in our panel. We should strive for more than equality with men. We have to try to get everything, not just equality. We have a tendency to self-limit ourselves, to self-censor ourselves. We need to reach the place where men reach, but we need to think to go beyond. It's really powerful to think about this in these terms. Well, what Raisa has said about higher education, well, more pragmatic, this is also important. We have to bear in mind that promoting education from our perspective, from the Foundation Women of Africa, this is very interesting. It's important that we don't just help women to become more socialized, because this is the main instrument of empowerment for wellness for them and for their communities to reach these power places. We need to help them so that this education translates into job opportunities, so that it becomes a bridge to get a job, which is what's really going to boost empowerment and wellness in life. And I'll finish with these mentorships. We said that men should also be included in these mentorship processes. And there should be intergeneration mentorship inherited from one generation to another. And the role of embassies is critical, as agents, our Spanish embassies in the different countries, they should be agents that boost equality programs in each specific country. And last but not least, something that Raisa said, we mentioned how important it is to establish bridge between the academia and the business world, but also between think tanks and the academia, between experiences such as this program. Today, women experiences in different professional areas, different countries, social areas. We need to know what each one of us is doing, what we are thinking. We have to share our knowledge. We need to know about our own stories. There are things that we don't know, the past, the present, in order to move forward. We need to work on those bridges together from the academia, but also with the other spheres of our society. Thank you.
Gracias, Teresa. Gracias.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Raisa. The presence of women in the public sector is also very important, and there they can play a paramount role in something that we all want, which is female empowerment and leadership. In our conversation in this area, we have Rosario Vieira from Cabo Verde, Amal Abdelazar from Egypt, and the presenters will be Sulaima Isaac Mohammed Al Khalifa from Sudan and Irune Aguirre Zabal from Spain. It was a bit complicated. After what has happened these past hours in Sudan, we would want to express our solidarity with Sudan and the Sudanese people. We'll always stand with democracy and the defense of human rights. We hope that Sudan will overcome this difficult situation and will continue in its way towards peace and democracy.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's really a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you to the Foundation Women for Africa and to the Spanish Corporation. And it gives me a great pleasure to start presenting what we discussed yesterday. As my colleagues before said, it was a very interesting discussion, and we were short of time, of course, to accomplish the task, really. So it's just the beginning of a long conversation that, of course, we hope we can continue to have by virtual networks and being together more. So the three women that were represented from African countries, the three women leaders were, as you said, from Cabo Verde, from Sudan, and from Egypt. These are already very interesting countries because they are diverse. So it's good that we had a different perspective of such an important topic as the presence of women in the public life, public and political life. What is the common shared agenda of all these three countries and also Spain is that we definitely need to promote the increase of the participation of women in the public and political life. This is very clear to all of us. Women's presence in the political and public life is definitely, as colleagues said it before, key. It's critical to change the social norms. So the policy of presence is a key one for feminism, absolutely a key one. And this one is aligned, of course, with Agenda 2030 agenda, the sustainable agenda. And I have to say that it was also shared by the colleagues, the importance, and I have to say also in Spain for the government and the institutions in Spain, it is also a shared value, the important weight that this agenda has in the countries. So I think it's very important to align to 2030 agenda, to SDG 5, of course, but also to what the agenda means in terms of gender equality and women's rights being in all the agenda, in all the 17 goals. It was also emphasized, and this will be aligned with what my predecessor said, the importance of the United Nations, the European Union, and in particular, the importance of the Spanish cooperation as a key guardian, Raisa said, a key guardian, she said, as an entity that really stands for the promotion of gender equality and women's political rights. I think that was a very important point. So, which common challenges women have to reach this common goal, to be present in the political and public life of our countries? We didn't go into all the obstacles and resistances, which are enormous, as we know. I will just mention three and give the floor to my colleague who will go to all the details. The three main obstacles are, first of all, a legal normative framework. Second, fostering women's movements. And third, co-responsibility. First of all, the legal framework, the normative framework. We need all African countries to ratify the CEDAW, the Convention for the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. But not only that, there's also a regional framework and also sub-regional framework, as we know, in Africa, in the different sub-regions of Africa. Africa is huge, of course, and each sub-region. And then there needs to be a dialogue amongst these legal frameworks. And then this has to be implemented and ratified, and also there needs to be legal laws, of course, norms in each country. Laws that support and adopt a minimum quota, at least, for women to be in public life. We know that the minimum quota, as we know, for that critical mass of women to be able to change and influence is 30%, but that's the minimum. And not only laws are not implemented, but even when laws are implemented, like it is the case of one of the countries, it is not always the case that they are effective, because they don't have all the conditions that are necessary for the laws to be effective. For example, the sanctions, in case political parties don't follow the laws, of course. So that's the first challenge. The second one is we need to engage more with women's movements, and we need women's movements to be more supportive. This is interesting because I didn't hear the same in other groups. What I heard, and I understood, and you will correct me, Suleima, is that women's movements often are still very weak. Two main reasons. One is that they are not supported enough, and we know this. I know this especially from the region of Latin America. We know that supporting women's movements is the key driver to social norms change. There's evidence, enough evidence. So if the Spanish cooperation wants to support the change towards gender equality, supporting women's movements is absolutely critical, as they did, for example, in other regions of the world. But also there was another challenge which was mentioned, which is that often women who reach power are not supportive enough of the other women. So we need to work on that. We need to work on that, and there's a name for the syndrome. It's in the academy we called this. They have the syndrome of those women who reach power and then they don't. We need to work on that. I see it's probably true in other countries. Well, and the third challenge is the principle of co-responsibility. This is enormous, and we saw it with COVID. Citizenship is not only political citizenship. If you don't have social citizenship, you don't have the real citizenship that women need. And that means that you need states and public institutions to develop public policies, to be co-responsible for care, for example, which is one of the main areas where women and men will be equal effectively and sustainably if they are both responsible for the policies of care. So this is mainly what we discussed in general, and then I pass the floor. Thank you.
Good evening, colleagues, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, my colleague here. And actually, my colleagues there in my group, actually thank you for the commitment and the discussion. It was very fruitful discussions. What I like about the title of the workshop, it's about like, we are similar, we are different, but we are equal. This is very much something I like. That's women fight and struggle is the same everywhere. Whatever it is, the ethnicity or the continent or the religious or the language. We are all having the same problems, but we are different in the context, the social context, the cultural context, and the political context, of course. I will share some of the things that have been shared with my colleagues in Cabo Verde and Egypt. How about also political stability and commitment from the state will help on some of the things that related to women empowerment and equality. Regarding the presence of women in public administration, as my sister in Cabo Verde is talking about, like they have 72 parliamentarians, and 27 of them are women, and they have women ministers, 6 are women actually. But there's a parity law in the country, not very much implemented, but there is a law. We don't have the same thing in Egypt and Sudan, but actually in Egypt also there's a presence of women in public administrations with good, relatively good numbers in comparison with other countries, in comparison in Swiss Sudan, for example. At least they have numbers, because also political stability and commitment also help in providing statistic and data that will give you a way to go forward and something that you can build on. And then they have social services built on that statistic, something they learned from, and so they have this kind of momentum of agenda, so they could actually complementing the agenda of 2030 and the SDGs. They have the challenges, of course, and we share most of the challenges together, but at least the way, the context within their countries provide space for women to participate and for women to have voices and to be in the public administration with more positions. In Sudan, it's a little bit different because it's a transitional government. We don't have numbers. When people get appointed in this transitional government, they don't even have any numbers. I will tell you a story. There was the year in 2019, I guess, they have been celebrating 30 years of women traveling to Peking, actually being part of the conference, and women from civil society in Sudan shared their stories, how they fight to get their places and travel, because they have been prevented by the government, even the security forces. So they're not going to take place and participate in this international conference talking about population issues. And after like 35 or 34 years, they are back. They are strong leaders, they're doing things, they're making change and everything. So within this, we cannot say that we have this quota for women, because other people have laws for quotas. In Egypt and Cabo Verde, they have laws for the quota, laws for that's govern, that's women participation. We have the quota law, but before it was in the last regime, it was only 25%. In the constitutional declaration and document, when we declared the transitional government, we signed over 40% of participation of women within the parliament and within government chairs. But what happened after that, very small numbers of women have been ministers, very small numbers of women have been in leadership within Sovereignty Council and other places within the transitional government. Although there's a full commitment and political commitment from the prime ministers saying that he works for women equality and everything. The other thing within that transitional government, we managed to have, after 20 years, after the 1325 resolution, after 20 years, we managed to have a national plan where participation and equal participation of women have been called for. Ratification of CEDAW and other international treaties and regional treaties had been a commitment within that strategy, as a national plan will become a strategy for the country. Protection, prevention, and working on rehabilitation is because Sudan, not only the parts suffered from conflicts are suffering, but actually the whole Sudan, we can call it in a place where there is emergency. The transitional government, since it was deployed, it was the most unfortunate government in the world. There was the COVID after few months is when it was actually appointed, and then there was a flood. The flood crisis was like, from the 100 years, we have never had a flood like that. So there's so many crises happened to that government, but they have been working on so many things to get ratifying of laws, ratifying CEDAW, and we have been opposed by the stigmatization of CEDAW that's happened during the last 30 years of dictatorship. People have been only working on that CEDAW is bad, CEDAW is not good for your religious, CEDAW is telling, there's a lot of myths about CEDAW. So everybody will talk about CEDAW when they never read the document itself. They have no idea what CEDAW is, but it's been criminalized, stigmatized with no reason. So even when they have been ratifying this within the Ministry of Councils, some of the people who are also now affiliated with this military coup happening now, they have been also taking sides of not ratifying CEDAW. Although Mobutu went with no reservations, because Mobutu have no stigmatization, people have no idea what Mobutu is, which is more radical than CEDAW, which is good, that's good. And that, the way that we have been doing things, and transitional government is just a toddlers, and it's not even a child yet, and we cannot change everything in transition, we know that. Transition is about building stability and building foundation for more stable democratic transition and preparing people for elections. And that's mean have equal share for women to be part of those elections, have safe, also friendly spaces for women to participate within their parties and within the public spaces, claiming their public rights to be part of these elections without being harmed. And because we know that there are going to be a lot of violences against women in elections, a lot of people that will try to prevent women participation and women taking places in the public spaces. But within all this struggle, and we are noticing all this strategy, and then this military coup taking place. And this will diminish everything people is doing. People have been working very hard since the last 2 years, because revolution is not something that it's not a momentum that it's lost. It's a momentum that's building itself on and on and on. There's a generation also building this revolution. Then some of them are very young when we started the struggle in 2018, but now they're growing up, they're entering universities. They have been teenagers at that time, but now they're in the early 20s. So it's a momentum build itself. It's never end. And I think that women, because women participation, we didn't want to say thank you. Didn't anybody to say thank you to us. Our participation and our struggle and our movement and the significant role we have been playing in this movement is not something charitable. We didn't want charity for it because we didn't want thank you. We didn't want appreciation. We just want to gratify our rights, our equality, our share of the public spaces, our share of the political agenda, our share of the services. Women in Sudan are the backbone of economy, and they don't have the same share in services. The same women who produce 70% of agriculture could die in childbirth. So this is the inequality we're talking about. It's not just about political agenda or high senior jobs. It's also about rights to gratify rights for services and accessible to health, access to justice, and peaceful communities. This is, I think, what we all aim for in our communities, not just in Sudan. In all Africa, what we aim for is to have peaceful communities, have good access to justice, equal share of everything and services, and dignified life. That's all we need. Thank you. The last thing I want to say is it could be we can have some kind of a wake-up call for all women in Africa, not just the women who are working and things like that, but also the women movement to be much more stronger. We are relying on their strengths. We are relying on their resilience. We have a history mark of a lot of sacrifices, resilience, and giving and endurance. Why not be united for one cause, for women equality, or in spite of disgregations because of I don't like this person, I don't like this party, or this ideology. Has to stop, and this has to get enough.
Gracias, Sulaima. Gracias, Irune.
Thank you, Sulaima. Thank you, Irune. Another of the fields where we still have a long way to go for women is the business world. And the women role in this field is essential because one of the keys is employment, incorporating women to the labor force, because that means that they will have a better presence in our societies. But in this field, the deficiency of women presence is still very big, especially in African countries. In this group, we had Khadija Amoua from Ghana and Ana Bujaldun from Spain, but I am sure that their dialogue was more than fruitful, and I'm sure that they will be presenting very interesting conclusions. I give you the floor. Khadija works in an important company in the energy business in her country, and our Spanish colleague works in FEDEPE. Good afternoon to all of you. I will speak in Spanish. First of all, I want to say that it was an honor for me and a pleasure to be a part of this meeting, Diferentes pero Iguales. I want to congratulate Mujeres por África for this interesting initiative, this program, Raisa. I think it's highly valuable, and I also want to thank the support from the AECID. It was great to have the opportunity to share experiences with Khadija. It was fantastic. I got to know a woman who is strong and exceptional. First woman leading a company in the energy business in her country. And I think she's leading the board on her own. During our lunch yesterday, we found many aspects were in common, especially starting with our first steps in the business world. We both started working when we were very young, and we both founded our own companies. We both had to combine studies with work to keep evolving. Khadija and myself, we are both in favor of mentoring among women, which is something we already mentioned today. And in her case, she's also helped empowering other women in her country so they could study and work, and very important, not to limit their own dreams. In my case, as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur, I'm a businesswoman since the 1990, and also working in FEDEPE, which is a foundation. I'm sure you know the institution. It's very diverse, and it's a reference for women leadership in Spain. We have more than 6,000 women, and we foster talent. We support other women so they can personally and professionally grow through different programs, training programs, leadership programs. Our objective is to give visibility to women talent and promote their access to high responsibility positions, because we know that there are still very few women in Spain and in the world in these positions. During our discussion, I think that we were both impressed by the different realities in our countries. For example, for her, it was surprising that in Spain we have a wage breach, and that it can be even up to 27%. And if we talk about retirement funds, we know that sometimes it reaches even 38%. One of the aspects that was surprising for Khadija, I'm sure she will want to tell us that too, the equality plans that we have in Spain, the parity plans in companies, even in companies with more than 50 employees. It used to be compulsory only for those with 250 employees. So she thought it was interesting. It was an idea that we could export to her country. And I believe, I don't know if you agree, is that these plans have been an important tool in Spain to foster equal opportunities for women, and I'm sure that it can also be very positive in her country. I was also impressed, she was impressed to know that they have a high number of women with great training, but they are not hired for employment. This is incredible and unbelievable, especially if we think that African women are the engine of their economy, actually the engine of their society. And as I could also discuss with you yesterday, Khadija, I believe that in order to promote full participation of women in politics and the economy, we need to improve our presence in the decision-making bodies. This is the present and the future in any place in the world, and it is very important for us women to be there. We cannot miss this opportunity. We need to devise the new production model, social model in our countries. This access to the technology sector will make it possible for us to improve our employment rates and get a better balance in the labor sector. So this needs to be one of our most important goals, because we know that there are sectors can also become precarized. The glass ceiling has been one of the limits that we thought it was important to mention in the business world. As I was saying at the beginning, it was a real pleasure to participate in this event and get to know a little bit more about women in Africa. Khadija and I, we agreed we're gonna stay in touch in the following months, sharing experiences and reflections, and maybe, who knows, maybe even organizing some other events. As an African proverb says, if we teach a boy, we train a man. If we teach a girl, we would be training the whole village. As women, we are for the world. Thank you, Khadija, and all of you African and Spanish women inspiring us. Khadija, I give you the floor.
Much, Anna. Yeah, and actually that's a saying by Dr. Kwejuri Agri, a Ghanaian, very great Ghanaian in the past, who said that if you educate a man, you educate an individual, but if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. So thank you very much, Anna. Thank you. And so yes, it was very insightful. Anna has been doing a lot of work with FEDEPE where they look to advocate for women who are entrepreneurs and also professional women. Because sometimes we take it for granted that when a woman is an entrepreneur or a professional, it's like everything is fine, she has no problems, and to let it just flow. There are issues with maternity leave, there are issues with childcare. And so within her space, she's devoted a lot of time to ensuring that women at least at her level and at other levels for people who are aspiring to get there are comfortable, are ahead, and are making a difference. And so I'd like us to give Anna a round of applause on this. And she's, like she said, I will not belabor the point she's already raised. She spent her life working for women. So essentially from when she was about 14, she started a business, but most of her time and her efforts have been dedicated towards ensuring that women are ahead. She's into advertising. She spent a lot of time trying to correct stereotypes. Examples like when you see a washing powder advert, it's a mother who's washing. There's nothing wrong with washing, but these are just traditional stereotypes we need to be able to break. And so it was very, very insightful to see what she's done at her level. I will take it in 3 parts. I'll take it just to give some context, the background on gender equality, on where we are and where I think we should be heading. So I think that for most people, or some people, we feel like, oh, why do you have to be an activist? It's too stressful to be fighting. No one is saying keep fighting, but I think it's important that we understand the history of where we're coming from, right? So for today's generation, we may not understand what an equal pay is. We may not understand what it means for a girl child to not be educated, because most of us just were educated. There was no drama around it. After school, you got a job, and so you feel like, oh, it's normal. But no, it's not normal. Somebody had to fight. I was watching a documentary about RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the US Supreme Court judge, and how when she was going to Cornell, there was a ratio of 1 female to 5 males. In my time, there was no ratio. So all I saw was you could just get up and go to school. I was watching a documentary about, a show actually, a TV show called Bridgerton by Shonda Rhimes. It's set in 1813, and in it there's a character called Eloise Bridgerton who just wants to go to school. Her brother attended Oxford and had this very handsome-looking man for a classmate, also in Oxford. And her mother couldn't understand why she wanted to read and not get married. It was such a burden for her mother to have a daughter who wants to read and not want to dress in ball gowns and get married. And if you look at this, I was telling myself that I would easily have passed for Eloise in 1813. So what I'm trying to say is, and the last point I'll make is, University of Oxford, where I attended, has we celebrated 100 years of female degrees in Oxford last year, 2020. Oxford has been in existence from 1096, do the math. So my message around understanding and appreciating the struggle is the fact that it hasn't always been this way. And so we need to be conscious about the fact that somebody fought for us to get to where we are. And we should not just accept it. Let's also try to make a difference for those before us. So I always say that may our lives be a worthy tribute of those who fought before we came, and may it be inspiring, and may we make a difference for those who will come after us. Now to the issues. We've talked a lot about the fact that there are laws and there are regulations for most of the groups that have presented around gender equality, but they are not enforced. For me, it's a win. It's a win, it's a small win because a society that has laws on gender equality or equal pay, I come from Ghana, we have a Labor Act of 2003 that says there should be equal pay. So even if we do not have equal pay, it's not acceptable, although I do not see it's not very prevalent where a man and a woman are doing the same job but are paid differently. Traditionally, it will be based on how you negotiate. I feel like societies that have a baseline of some form of regulation have at least acknowledged that there's a problem we're trying to correct. And so for those of us who come from such societies, we should make it a point to try and get it enforced. At least there is a law. So how do we advocate to create awareness for these laws to be enforced. I don't take it for granted. I feel like just like someone had to fight for us to be equal in terms of race and other forms of discrimination we've seen, and now on gender, if I have to advocate for certain gender laws which exist but are not being implemented to be implemented, then that's my fight and I'll take it on. And I feel like that's a good starting point to take the small wins and translate or transform them, use them as a tool to transform everyday lives. Another thing that Anna shared was we talked about what difference do you make in your everyday life in relation to gender equality. She talked about just brightening the corner where you are. In your little space, in whatever space, whether it's mentoring, we both mentor young girls, and it was very interesting when we shared our experiences of how the influence of our lives changes these girls for the better. And so it's just sometimes you don't need a big microphone and a platform to speak about it. But I think it's important to be aware that women have not always been here. Some people fought, and we must continue. The cause of gender equality must move from a cause to the status quo. For those of you who don't speak English, I don't know if translator is getting me. It's important that we move from talking about it to it being everyday life. We never have a conference about male equality or gender equality in relation to men, because that is the status quo. There's no conference about maternity, women having to be pregnant. There's no conference about that, because naturally that's what comes, right? And so we need to work till we get to the point where this is not a cause, but it's everyday life. It's normal for women to be in high positions. Another thing we spoke about, which I find happening in Ghana and some communities across Africa, there's been a lot of effort to educate women. So the saying she quoted, which was by Dr. Kwejuri Agri, and it said that when you educate a man, you educate an individual, but when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. It was because in his time, girl child education was not the norm. And so it just tells you where we are coming from. So today in Ghana, there's free education at the high school level. People have been educated. There's been a lot of sensitization to get girls educated. We're at a point where educated women need opportunities. I'm in the oil and gas sector. I'm the first Ghanaian woman to head an oil and gas exploration production company. It should not be the case, because there are many educated and qualified women. And so we need to open doors for women. We need to create the opportunities so women can thrive. So I feel like every society has its nuances. In your society, it may be gender-based violence. Sometimes they are mixed. It doesn't have to be one size fits all. In some societies, it's early marriages. Today, one of our colleagues from Niamey was talking about the fact that about 87% of girls under 18 have to get married before they turn 18. That's serious. But then, so every society has its nuances, and we should take the fight and just make a difference wherever we can. And gradually, as we are conscious and remain aware that this is a fight that goes on, we create opportunities for women, and we will get there. I think that I don't want to do a half-sat. Those who understand, understand. So I'm going to pause there so I don't pull a half-sat. So yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. And like I said, I always say, may our lives be a worthy tribute to those who have fought before us, and may it be a proper inspiration, may it make a true difference to those who will come after us. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Khadija. Gracias.
Thank you, Khadija. Thank you, Anna. If there is a situation where women are especially vulnerable, are conflict or war situations, when we can even become a weapon in the battle. And it's also true that women can play an important role in peace mediation and conflict mediation, but women organizations complain because of the scarce regulations in this field from the institutions in Africa, but also in the rest of the world. Because while women are not there, and while we are not relevant in peace processes, these take so long. And I would like to share a personal experience, because I think that we need to bear this in mind. When we are negotiating in countries where women are repressed, where women are not present in the public space, in the international institutions and organizations negotiate with male representatives. They negotiate with men. The situation would be very different if instead of men, women were there to negotiate with them. First, because we would make those men look to us in the eye, talk to us if they want help, and that would be a big step forward, and that would help women in those countries. That's why it was important to have women in this field with us, 2 women from Africa and 1 woman from Spain, talking about peace and safety and fight against violence. Julien Lusenge from Congo, and Ana Belén Perianes. The floor is yours.
Solo subís 2, vale. ¿Es igual o Julián?
Igual.
Igual.
Igual. Pues buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you to Mujeres por África and AECID for organizing this great event. The truth is that it was an honor for me to share a dialogue with Iwat and Julien. They are very strong women, and I'm really impressed by what they do. It was a very fruitful dialogue, and I think that we have more things in common than things dividing us, regardless of the different culture and contexts, but we have a common goal, the goal of fighting for gender equality and working in the women, peace and safety agenda that is so necessary. I'm going to give you some keys about the dialogue we shared yesterday and some suggestions. First of all, international cooperation is key, absolutely key, to keep working on the agenda. The agenda is a global agenda, it's not an agenda from any specific country in Africa or Spain. It's an agenda for the whole world. It's a global agenda because we are talking about human rights, not about a problem for women. Synergies are essential if we want to keep evolving. And we should learn, we must learn from each other, and we all have to work together from the different countries in Africa, from Spain, to make our voice heard, and so we can improve, so we can keep improving the situation. Something important as well is that our young people are the hope for the future, for a change. And as Iwad was saying, in her country, 3/4 of the population are young people, and more than half of them are women. So we thought that this was important as an idea for change. Safety needs to be inclusive. I think that there is no possible negotiation in these. And as I was saying before, it's a matter of human rights. It's not a women issue. We also talked about emergencies, urgent situations in Africa and in Spain. And we said how the young population is often left outside of peace processes. And we thought that this is relevant, also talking about culture and social norms that are affected by inequalities. we need for institutions to guarantee that women can participate, but in an effective way in the public space. And we also talked about sexual violence, forced marriages, all these great problems. We also talked about how in contexts where we have the right regulation, the right legislation to fight against gender violence, some judges are not enforcing these laws. And well, this is terrible, and it's difficult for them to acknowledge the role that women should play and rights for women that we have to accomplish. And this is a great problem, because sometimes it's difficult for families, it's not encouraging for families to speak up with this when these problems arise. And also we need women to be able to access mental health solutions and support. Also, my two colleagues talked about how we usually focus in the short term in the different projects. And that's a big problem, because this prevents us from getting the right results. Funding projects need to be focused in the long term and with funds, because otherwise they would get blocked in the middle of the way. Poverty for women as well, an important problem. Women most often work in with COVID, for example. We've seen how women are losing their resources to generate income. Another problem, war, a never-ending war. What does this mean? That women's body becomes a battlefield. Women are the ones that are losing more during a war process. We also talked about the situation in Spain, and we saw how gender violence is a terrible issue we're suffering in our country, and inequalities in the structures are preventing us from getting to our full potential. COVID increased gender violence, and we also saw that this is something that's universal, and it's an issue that we are facing in the whole world.
Las ideas y bueno, de propuestas. Hablamos de qué se puede hacer para empoderar a mujeres y niñas en contextos que padecen conflictos armados, y bueno, pues sobre todo comentaban ambas compañeras formación, financiación para reforzar capacidades. Las instituciones deben ser...
The institution should be inclusive. We also mentioned the important role men have. As I said before, men should be an important part. They are the ones that should respect women's rights in the first place. But we mentioned how important positive masculinity is, and they have to be within the process of development, implementation, verification, etc. of these policies, because this is non-negotiable. The international community should also play an important role. I mentioned funding because it's a very important issue. Funding should be sufficient and in the long term. The international community should check, should monitor that the goals are actually being achieved and that women have an effective participation. Social entrepreneurship. This was a topic that was also raised. This is important to provide basic services, just water, electricity. It was also said that the private sector is very important so that we don't always depend on government funding or UN funding, and also to economically empower women. Our colleagues see the future of their countries with hope because the population is very young and women are very strong. But the condition is that the war should come to an end. We also talked about what we could do together in order to move the agenda forward. And there are many things to be done. We can work in fostering skills for women, technical skills, training skills. Also funding long-term projects. I'm repeating this because it's something very important that was raised. We can have political influence so that women can speak up, we can listen to the victims. Victims should be listened to, and all women should lead the change and strengthen solidarity. And now, Iwad Elman from Somalia, she's going to speak now.
Well, thank you very much to my colleagues that are here on the stage with me and also in the audience. We had a really interesting conversation. I think it's quite fitting that we talk about our conversation at the end of all the other presentations. We heard from academia, knowledge management, private sector engagements, building legal frameworks, movement building, and championing gender equality. All of these elements make up a peace process. And in our conversations, as you've just heard right now as well too, we are not able to discuss peace and security without addressing all of the other needs women, children, communities at large have to protect that peace. The two countries that we focused on primarily outside of the Spain example as well was DRC and Somalia, both protracted conflicts. My country's been at war my whole life. I've never seen a peaceful Somalia. DRC, similar scenario. And what we saw as a similarity in our different countries is that there has been industrial-sized investments into the peacekeeping operations, but painfully slow progress when it comes to the inclusion and leadership and empowerment of women in these processes. We often hear that women make up half of the population, sometimes more, yet it's taken us decades to meaningfully engage women, to address peace and security issues, and to have a chance at leading in these solutions where others have failed. Hearing from the Spain experience and the prevalence of human trafficking and sexual violence, particularly during the COVID, also reminds you that peace is more than just the absence of war. So when we focus on building peace in our communities, we don't view peace as an event. We need long-term strategies. We need to invest in social peace, not only political peace, especially when we keep hearing from so many different examples where there are democracies, there are governance structures in place, there are processes, but political peace does not mean a peaceful society. We also felt a lot of frustration when we look at peace as an event because it perpetuates the obsession around the proverbial peace agreement table. Who's at that table? Who's mediating? Who's negotiating? Peace is a 20-year saga, if not more. And there are so many different initiatives that women lead on, that women are most uniquely placed to lead on, that are short-sighted in how we engage currently. I'm disappointed that 20 years into the championing of Resolution 1325, which we still celebrate every year as a groundbreaking historic commitment on the inclusion of women and girls in peace processes, that we have very little that we can celebrate as a result of this resolution in actually getting more women involved. It's a start and has led ways for subsequent resolutions like 2250 on the positive role of young people in peace and security. But it's still too slow, the progress that we're seeing. We heard earlier that we should celebrate that we have some processes and legal frameworks in place, even if they're not yet implemented. And I look at the international processes the same way. They're entry points for accountability, they're entry points for engagement for women and peace and security processes, but there's still so much more that can be done to fully invest in these agendas. We also talked about in our group some of the opportunities for cooperation and shared learning. And when we look at the Spanish cooperation and their investments on the continent, I think that there's a lot of opportunities on continuing to create platforms, convene women, create opportunities for joint action, but also to really invest in women peace builders. This is an issue that we often hear about and how important women's activism in this space is, but very little resources go to them directly. And often we hear the same messages. How do we monitor impact in a place that we can't visit? How do we build capacity when women don't have freedom of movement or can't leave this very areas that they're trying to intervene in? And it all comes back down to the full pursuit of inclusion as well. I don't think women in any sector are saying we all have to be at the table, but we want women that do represent us and can trickle that experience and open doors down for others to be the ones to represent us. And I think that's something important to think about for the peace and security space too. We need to evolve and move beyond the consistent labeling of countries in conflict as an area that can be fully engaged in. I want to touch just on one more point too about the role of young women particularly. When we talk about the women peace and security agenda, often that means older, elite women. When we talk about the youth peace and security agenda, often means young, elite men. What gets lost in that is the very niche and unique role of young women in these processes. We are often considered the spoils of war, beneficiaries at best of these processes, or implementing partners, but rarely critical partners that need to be involved throughout the entire life cycle of the process. And there are allotted spaces of where women, young women particularly, can engage in non-threatening issues, peer-to-peer, sports, all important parts of the peace continuum as well. But as soon as we start working on disarmament, demobilization, negotiations, mediation, that's not our domain, and it's still left to men. I'll end with one example that was triggered from Pilar's experience that you shared right now, that every chance we have to actually empower women's role in this space, we always revert back to the patriarchy, to leading and turning to the same old men to make decisions that affect everyone. And we saw a similar scenario of that in Somalia just a few months ago, where we were expecting elections to happen earlier this year in February, but then the current president did not want to facilitate that transition, and then the candidates were inciting violence and political violence. There was a ceasefire, there was the international community, many different actors trying to resume calm. That would have been an opportune time to engage women in the discourse, in the discussions, in the negotiations. Sometimes the same international actors perpetuate the very issues that we're trying to abolish, patriarchy, as a convenience, which is it would take longer to vet the right women to come together and to be a part of the ceasefire and dialogue than it would be easier to just bring the same men together. Well, what we see that having yielded is nothing, because the political impasse is still happening since February. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iwat. Gracias, Ana Belén. Y vamos a ir terminando ya con la exposición.
Now we're going to finish with the presentation of the different groups. Last but not least, my group is the last one, communication. This area is critical and strategic for the work that we're doing today. The media, also social media right now, they're very important to give a voice to those who don't have a voice, to amplify messages, to extend and amplify awareness campaigns on women's rights, and also for training in gender equality. I've been pleased to talk to two wonderful colleagues, Diaka Kamara from Guinea and Mariama Abdou Gabo from Niger. please, Diaka, Mariama, come to the stage so that we can explain the result of our dialogue. I'll just say a few words because you've been listening to me this afternoon. I want my African colleagues to explain the conclusions. I would like to highlight that we didn't have enough time to talk because we saw that the same situation was going on for each one of them. I guess this was the same situation in the other groups. We were convinced that this was just the first of many meetings and that this relationship that we have started in these meetings will be very fruitful. Perhaps we could suggest the Foundation Women for Africa to draft a list, if you all agree, with our names and contact details, so that we can keep in touch, not just those of us who were in the same group, but beyond our groups. Because that way, we know that we have each other in our different countries. I just want to say that right at the beginning of our discussion, I saw myself in things explained by Diaka and by Mariama. Maybe the main thing was that Diaka, like myself, she had problems to make her family understand, and so did Mariama, so that her parents, probably her father, understood that we wanted to become journalists, that we wanted to communicate. Although we live in different countries, and there's a difference in age too, but we face the same situation. We had to convince our parents that we wanted to become what we are today. As many of you, we were the first women in our family to have university studies. Probably we are the first ones that took a step forward in the fight for women's rights. So that's why I felt really identified with them, because the education process, how important education is to move forward in life, and this process of facing our families, probably their families and my family were equally conservative. This was very important so that we could start our fight for women's rights. So I don't want to take up other time. I want to give the floor to them so that they can explain. Mariama, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Pilar. Bonsoir à tous. C'est un réel plaisir de prendre la parole.
Thank you, Pilar. It's a pleasure being here. I would like to thank the Spanish Corporation for this program. Thank you, Raisa, that has invited us all to be here. I thank you for the foundation for this place they've provided us to meet. And we've talked, and we're equal but different, and they're common fights. It's always a pleasure to meet other women and learn from people who have more experience than myself, because I'm relatively young here. So I'd like to thank my elder sisters for helping me, for being so open. They've given me a very specific education. In our group, we have discussed the role of communication in gender equality, but particularly in the promotion of rights of young girls. Communication is everywhere. When laws are approved, it's in people's conscience, in lawsuits. This is a whole process promoting women's rights. We always have to communicate. And there are many common issues with Pilar, Diaka, and the other sisters. We share the same passion. We have differences. I studied medicine. I'm a blogger. I'm interested in reproductive health and family planning. In my country, there are 7.6 children, between 7 and 8 children per mother. So economically, we're not sufficiently stable and solid to receive this flow. Youth is strong, but you need a world to welcome you so that children can develop within the community. In our discussion, we started analyzing the obstacles and problems women face regarding our rights in our communities. And then we've seen what communication can provide, what us as communicators, as journalists, as bloggers, content creators, and social media, what's our contribution to foster these rights. Some key problems that we have highlighted, they have come up before with our colleagues, but we've seen that girls in Africa and many countries don't receive enough education. Unfortunately, many of them don't even go to school, or they go to school, but they don't study for many years. And this is favored by social customs, economy. In families, they often have to decide who goes to school and who doesn't. It's usually girls, the ones that don't go to school, because society says that they won't have responsibilities or no skills, and they're better off at home doing domestic chores. And some jobs, they are classified as male, such as journalism, for example. And we showed that women are very good communicators. In terms of negotiation, women can convince. In my country, when we have to speak about reproductive health, we have to include a module in schools. Imams, religious people, well, they rebelled and they said that they didn't want to go in those rooms. And a woman convinced them to go there. So a woman managed to convince men, and today sexual education is integrated in school centers in my country. There's a negative interpretation of Islam in conservative countries such as ours, where Islam has an important role. We've always said that Islam is a religion that has given every right to women, but some religious leaders have reductive interpretation of women's positions, and this blocks many laws. There's also a social vicious cycle for girls. Some think that this is legitimate, that the situation, the violence they suffer is legitimate. They grow in this environment and think it's normal. And also for men, they replicate adult behavior because they think that society should be that way. Women don't have rights and men have every right. We've also discussed the silence of women in the face of violence. And at some point, we decided that this is a genuine obstacle for us because we're fighting for the rights of women and girls. But it's like they didn't want these rights. They keep silent when they see violence, when they suffer violence. And sometimes in our assemblies, they go against what we are saying, even though they're women. So somehow they're legitimating what's happening. It's not normal. They have to speak up. We have also mentioned the role of men in discrimination, and we've said that we need women. We fight for the rights of women, but we need he for she. The men, have to understand that this is not normal. They have to change the rules. The same way we are educating girls, we have to educate boys the same way. In our countries, we've seen that, for example, in Kenya, a female mutilation takes place, genital mutilation, and this sort of female circumcision, this genital mutilation is carried out by women. They're paid to do that. It's income for them. So it's really difficult to change. You have to tell those women, you have to stop getting that income because this is bad for young girls, particularly when they've grown up in an environment in which they were told that this is good. To avoid out-of-wedlock pregnancies. We've also discussed marriage among young girls. 75% of girls in Niger marry before 17 years old. In a summit, they told me, how could you escape forced marriage? There's an economic role there, because parents think that by marrying their daughters, well, they get rid of an economic burden. It's mainly an economic problem. We have to explain this to families. We have to give them alternatives. We have to show them the economic impact girls may have. Each investment you make on a girl has an impact in their economy, in their life, and the economy of the whole country. The last thing we discussed was the scarce presence of women in international institutions, which prevents women from directly discussing their problems. It looks like it's men, the ones that have to go there and negotiate women problems. But women need to go there and talk about women's problems. They're the best negotiators you can have. We've also discussed something that has been previously mentioned. Women have to support each other. We cannot fight this individually. Men are a patriarchy. They support each other to protect their rights. And if we want to change things, we need to work together. And women, when we work together, we can do miracles. I remember President Obama. I had the opportunity to see him, and he said that the development of people is based in women. If people mistreat it's women, they cannot move forward. Women are incredible. I thank you. I would like to give the floor to Diaka, who's going to speak about solutions and the role of communication in promoting rights.
Journaliste, CEO de CBC Worldwide Communication and
My name is Diaka Camara, journalist in CBC Communication and president of Diaka Camara Foundation for Education. Over lunch yesterday, I was delighted to see what we were talking about. Different but equal. I started in French. Okay, I'll continue in English.
Was equal. It is true we are different, but we are equal in our struggles, our passions, our needs, and our wants. There's a perfect example of Pilar and I. For the little story, I wanted to be an archaeologist when I went to college. But I'm issued from an African family, and my mom was like, there is no way in hell I'm gonna spend all that money on you so you can go around the world, you know, dusting rocks. So you're either going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or something of that, you know, in that genre. So I was like, I loved history, actually. I was very passionate about history because I always believed that in order to know where we're going, we have to know where we come from. So I was like, okay, we did a compromise. I decided to study journalism. And Pilar was sharing the story with us that when she wanted to study journalism, her dad didn't actually speak to her. He didn't say bye to her, and she actually had to work in order to support herself, to put herself through journalism school. That was how many years ago? At least 30 years difference between when she went to school and when I went to school. And so once I graduated, I applied for a job at the United Nations. I was very, 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 very excited. But it was a position to be a reporter in Iraq. And back then there was a war. So I called my mom, very excited. Mom, you know, I applied for a job at the United Nations. I'm gonna work there. She was like, yeah. And I told her I'm gonna be moving to Iraq. She's like, pause, why Iraq? Well, to do my job as a journalist. And she started wailing. She called the whole family. Everybody called me. She's like, if you knew you were gonna waste my money going to college, you should have let me know. I would have saved my money. So I ended up not taking the job. And during our conversation, she was sharing the same worries that her family had, her being not only a journalist, but also a female journalist. And so it was just so amazing to see like two women from different corners of the world, years apart, still having the same struggle. And it is important to really talk about that because despite all these years, everything, all the work that is being done, we are still just a little bit better off, you know? And when I see all the incredible women that the program Raisa put together, I'm like, oh my God, in each corner of the world, women are fighting for their right, women are fighting to end gender-based violence, but how come the progress is so little? Women are fighting for peace, and yet there is no peace. So one of the questions that Pilar asked, well, is how can we, you know, make it work? How can we truly affect change? But so, first of all, this synergy, the meeting of this extraordinary woman that you guys are in this room is a step forward. Because like Mariam has said, the patriarchy, they're really good at sticking together to make their agenda move forward. Even in my country, when you take politics, you have opposition and the people in power fighting, insulting each other in the morning from sun up to sundown. But guess what? Behind closed doors, they're friends. Behind closed doors, they give each other high five. Yeah, was my speech a little too much? You know, do you think? Yeah, tone it down a little bit. You know, that's how the patriarchy has been able to stand the test of time. Women, we need to do the same, and it starts within our homes. When we talk about education, it's not just the education that our children receive in school. It's also the education that we give as parents, because we are the first teachers of our children. When an example, my sister, my nephew, and my niece, my nephew does more dishes than my niece at the house. My nephew does laundry, and I told him, I said, Bernard, you are going to be an excellent husband someday. But my sister made sure to teach them, oh, it's not just the girls that does the dishes or the boys. No, you are all equal in this house. If it doesn't work for you, go get your own place. But as women, because we are the one who teach those values to our children. So it's important to start at home, not only with the little boys, but for the girls to teach them self-worth. When I launched the campaign Brisons le silence, which means break the silence, which was about giving voices to the survivor of gender-based violence and talking about subjects that are taboo in our society, child bride, female genital mutilation, violence, domestic violence, rape, and sexual harassment, not only in the school, but in the workplace, I met with girls, and they would look at me and be like, but wait, when you say violence, what do you mean violence? So if my boyfriend slaps me, is that violence? Yes. Oh, no. But if he doesn't beat me up, he doesn't love me. What is that? That you equate violence with love. But then again, if you grew up in a family where your mother or your father used to beat on your mother, that's how you value love. So it's important as women, even because sometimes, you know, it's very easy to say, oh yeah, we need change. Oh yeah, if you're in a dangerous situation, get up and leave. We are privileged to be here and having these discussions, you know, and sitting on our high horses. Oh yeah, we need to change this and that. But for most of these women, they don't have a choice. When you meet a woman whose landlord is raping her 8-year-old, and she looks at you and she tells you, I cannot do anything, otherwise I won't have a place to sleep, what do you tell her? You know? So it's important as women to teach our girls and our boys what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And when we talk about media, our job is a very important one, because communication is the window to everything. Through the media, we are able to share the messages. We are here today. Everything that we have said has been recorded, either for TV or social media. And it's through media that we share all of these stories of these amazing women doing incredible things, and also teach these women about their rights, about what is right, what is wrong, and what they should expect from society. So it's a very, very, very important role that the media has, and also to set the truth free, like they said, because there's a lot of misinformation that we often see out there. One of the reasons that I got into even content creation is because I was sick and tired of only seeing, stories about Africa, about disease, death, war, true, we have issues. Hell, the whole world has issues, but we also have good things happening, and we need people to tell about those stories, those success stories. The young woman that fights for peace, the young judge that is here, that is working to make it happen for the women in her country, and all of you around this table. So it is critical that the media tell the truth, tell the stories authentically, so that it can reach the masses and the people that needs to hear it. Same thing about social media. Social media can be used for a force of good. We've seen Trump do what he did with social media. But social media also is a very powerful tool to reach out the masses. Today, Africa's population is a very young population. We are all connected, from the farthest village to the cities. Everybody is connected via their cell phone. Break the Silence campaign went viral because of social media. And I think that the fact that this program has put all of us together should be an example to show that the only limitations that we have are those that we put on ourselves. And to me, seeing all the incredible women that you are working and finding each in your side of the corner, if we get together, we can accomplish so much more. And to finish with what my sister Hafsata said, every woman is an activist by the simple fact that you were born a woman. It might be a small struggle, it might be a big struggle, but we are all activists because every day we are each fighting for something. Thank you.
Gracias, Dia.
Thank you very much, Diaka. Thank you, Mariana. You can imagine how the discussion was yesterday. From everything we heard here, we can establish some conclusions, like a summary of everything we've listened to, and some other contributions as well. First, that these meetings, these dialogues are essential to make us realize that we have more things in common than things dividing us when it comes to gender equality, because we are different, but we are the same. These are essential factors to keep fighting for gender equality and for accomplishing our goals. We need to work from all the different fields to achieve the goals that we have as women. We need to increase presence of women in all those fields, in all those areas where we work. I think that for all of us, it's very clear that education is key for empowering women. We need a union and interaction of women committed with change. This is essential. So these meetings, this sisterhood that we generate in these meetings are important to get to know each other better and to put objectives together, because as you've heard, Mariana, I don't remember who said it, patriarchy is very good in remaining there and in trying to divide women. They've been achieving that so far, but I think we need to fight so this stops. We need to break the glass ceiling and wage inequality. We need to keep working for women education and for their development in employment. We cannot forget what I said before. The international community needs to be committed, needs to engage to break these gender inequalities. Synergies are essential. We need to work together in order to foster our efforts. The international community must speak up for women to work in the objectives of the female agenda, peace and safety. We need to work and change the mindset of our population while we are working in the legislation. If we don't change the mindset, it doesn't matter how many laws we have. It will be very difficult to enforce them. The media and the institutions can help us in sending this message to the population, and this needs to be our most important objective. We will keep sharing these dialogues, these discussions. We are all women that want to walk hand in hand and keep working in fighting for a better world. And this is why we want to increase sorority, which is the pillar of our feminism. And it's always been one of the goals of the foundation Mujeres por África. And from here, I want to send a message to Afghan women, especially for those who believed in the international community and opened the window to their dreams, those who are fighting and who fought for women's rights and who now are exiled or hidden not to be murdered by barbarians. To those Afghan women who, even risking to lose their own life, they go out in the street and they face the Taliban. Let's not forget our sisters when the media stop focusing on their country, like it's already happening. So let's give them an applause, please.
Bueno, vale. Quiero agradecer.
I want to thank, we want to thank Casa Árabe and their team for having us here today, welcoming us here. And to finish, I think that there are 4 principles that we need to always keep, and we need to call for women to bear this in mind. One is keep going and keep building.
Be an activist of women's rights. We shouldn't limit ourselves. We should fight for what we want. And don't forget, we are different but equal. Para concluir,
and to finish, I just want to remind you that Friday morning we will have the last event of the Raisa program, also here in Casa Árabe, open face-to-face and also on streaming. African leaders will share their impressions about their visit in Madrid and what they are bringing back to their countries from Spain. Thank you to African and Spanish women here, and thank you to all of you here or on streaming. Thank you.